Good morning, starshines. My name is DH, my pronouns are they, them, and I play cozy games. And I knit and crochet and do a bit of bullet journaling, and some other stuff too. Every Monday evening on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/thecozydh, is our weekly crafty chat. Bring your project, bring something to stay hydrated with, but most importantly, just bring yourself. Each week, I'll post highlights from the stream, any tips I give, or just show off what I'm working on. To see more and join the conversation, follow me on Twitch to know when Crafty Chat goes live, and then join us. I can't wait to see ya. So, like I said, I have my knitting mojo back. Woo! At least for this specific project, and then I was like thinking of casting on a new project because I don't have enough knitting projects on the needles. But I'm trying to be gentle with myself and kind of go with my feels. So this is what was stuck in my head. And I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. But this is a advent shawl called What Tomorrow Brings. And it's designed to be knit with 25 mini skeins. So just a little bit. Like you can see this first section is very small. And then it's kind of like a sampler stitch pattern. It looks really cool. Yeah, I am doing this section on straights. These are probably my favorite brand of straights. These are the Knitter's Pride wood. And I actually love this line because they're a rainbow. So each size of needle is a different color. I mean, they're all printed with the sizes on the tips there. I don't think that's going to focus, but yes, the only straights in the house. I don't have a lot of straights. I have 2 sets of the Knitter's Pride in 3.75 and 6.5 millimeters, so not even related. I have my grandmother's vintage straights, and then I think I have some 4.5 and some 5s just in case. I like using them every now and then. It's very situational. I'm gonna have to switch to circulars for after I finish this section of the shawl. So yeah, it's hard for me to stretch it out, but you can see each section has a different stitch pattern. So we start off with garter, and then we move into the rib, and then go into the garter, and then there's this eyelet section, more garter, and then like a it's not quite moss stitch, it's like a double moss stitch. And then, yeah. So let me show you what it's supposed to look like. I'll pull it up for you guys. So this is the shawl. It's called What Tomorrow Brings, and it was from designer Stephanie Lotvin, and it just came out last December. It was originally designed to go with this advent that you can see pictured. Which is I can't even remember, but it was like a Quiet Voices, I think was the name of the advent, and it was meant to be very pastel and sweet like that. So as you can see, I'm working on this center triangle here. I'm working on this center triangle with the patterning, and then I will pick up for these stripes in the middle, and then finally I'll do these stripes. So this side, the right side of the shawl, that final section is knitted sideways, and then the left side is knitted lengthwise. So it's really interesting. Each section is a different technique, different color, different technique. So you never really get bored working on it. I'll give you another picture. So there it is. It's so pretty. I'm really excited, and mine should end up being about this big, or if not bigger, because it is designed to be on sock yarn with 2.5 millimeter, and I'm doing mine on 3.75 millimeter. And yeah, and then there's a close up of some of the sections with the different textures. So yeah, I'm very excited to see how this all comes together. So the top triangle section I'm doing it as a rainbow. So I started off with red, moved through orange, yellow, green, and then I have this like teal color, turquoise, and now I'm starting into the blues. And I've got like a blue, another blue, and then like a indigo, and then two purples. Um, so the middle section is going to be a rainbow. Um, the 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 stripe section this way is also going to be a rainbow because we love some rainbows. And then because I do not have enough oranges, yellows, and reds, the last 6 sections are just going to be purples and blues. Because I am doing this all out of scraps. You've probably all seen the beautiful gradient cakes from Hobby. They have their Hobby Twister line. They have the Cotton King Sultan and Sultan Deluxe. Toot has made some absolutely beautiful shawls out of it, and I'm using all of her leftovers. So we definitely have a color palette in this house. But yeah, you can actually check out the yarns that I'm talking about are the ones that we used, or Toot used for our Etsy, that she just threw up a link for. So you'll see some of these colors repeated in those shawls because that's where they originally came from. Because the very beginning and the very end of each cake is a solid color, so I'm just using the very beginning and the very end, not the middle bits where they have the gradients. But you can see because the next section, really after I finish this middle triangle, I'm going to be knitting along the entire length of the triangle, so I'll need circular needles at that point, but for now I'm just working on my straights. I know it's a little bit odd, but I don't know, I was feeling straights when I started the project, so that's what I went with. And you can see I just started this dark blue color. So I was like, oh, great. I'll have something like interesting to show on stream because I was working on this lace pattern, and I finished the eyelet lace, and now I'm just working on garter stitch. So it's just knitting back and forth for 30 rows. There is a slight bit of interest because it's got this I-cord border that's knitted on. So that's created by slipping the last 3 stitches of every row purlwise and then knitting them on the return row, and you end up with this nice rolled eye-stitch border that you don't have to add on afterwards. Lovely. And thank you, Toot, for dropping the Etsy link. I did just post my first round of cross-stitch patterns available for sale on the Etsy, if you guys want to check that out. I do like the laminated wood with the cotton because this yarn is all 100% cotton, every scrap of it, which can be a little bit slippy, I find. So the laminated wood is nice and grippy for that. In another server, we were talking about how there seems to be a large number of like accountants and IT professionals in cross stitch because it's relaxing and creative, but at the same time it makes your brain go burr the same way numbers do. If numbers make your brain go burr, that is. And of course, we are joined on Critter Camp by Pow, who is stomping around her enclosure, doing circles. I actually had to clean up her enclosure a little bit before the stream because she had uprooted some plants and just left the roots sitting in the middle of her enclosure. Her furniture was tossed over in a heap. She had a fake log shoved inside one of her hides. Basically, she had been a menace. so she needed to get a little bit tidied up before her home was presentable for camera. So I'm at the end of the row here, and what I'm going to do is, you can kind of see it on the previous row. How close did I get? But I moved the yarn over to the front, and then I slipped these 3 stitches purlwise off the needle without working them. And then just turn, work the next row. And as I work them, it rolls those 3 stitches into this elongated I-cord edging, which looks very neat, very tidy. So yes, my knitting mojo is back, sort of. Of course, I don't want to work on any of my big projects that I keep saying I want to get done first. No, I only want to work on the small projects. I want to get this shawl, if not done, then significantly progressed. And I've got my vintage innovation socks that I would also like to get some work in on. Sock week is coming up, so I might participate in that and try and get 1 vintage sock done in a week. Considering that the first sock has taken me months, I don't know exactly how successful I will be. But that could be a fun little challenge to try and get a sock done in a week. I am working them on bigger needles, so they might go by pretty quick. Sock Week is a yearly knitting event. It was started by the YouTuber Nitty Natty, and it was originally coincided with Shark Week. So the idea was you would try and finish a sock while watching all of the Shark Week programming. Sock Week, Shark Week. It's a cute thing. Oops, sorry. But it got to the point where there was so much organizing going into Sock Week, and Discovery Channel wasn't announcing Shark Week early enough for Sock Week to be organized to be at the same time. So now Sock Week just takes place in July at some point, not necessarily in collaboration with Shark Week anymore. But the idea is you have a week. I think it's actually 8 days. I think it runs Saturday to Saturday. And you try and start and finish a sock in that time frame. Not a pair of socks, just a single sock. But the fun part is you're doing it with, tons of people from around the world all at the same time. So we might try that this year. If anyone wants to join me, maybe we can get a little knit along going on in the server. That'd be fun. Although it doesn't look like it at the moment, because I'm about to show you another project that's on straights, I actually do prefer circular needles. They're just a lot more comfortable usually, and they're a lot more handy dandy. They're more compact. They can hold more stitches, that kind of thing. But every now and then, I'm just feeling the urge to knit on straights. You learned on straights but can't use them anymore. Yeah, a lot of people are like that. I mean, you don't really need straights anymore. In so many ways. But in knitting terms, anything a straight can do, a circular can do better, basically. At least that's my opinion. But every now and then, I like just the feeling of having the straights. The other project I'm working on straights right now is the sock I was just talking about for Sock Week. It's the Innovation sock. It's a vintage pattern, which is knit on straights. So I'm using my great-grandmother's straight needles. You can kind of see it, but my great-grandmother was a very tight knitter, and her needle is ever so slightly curved, um, because she was such a such a tight knitter. She was such a tight knitter that this pair of needles is a little bit curved, even though they're metal. So yeah, but it's a vintage pattern. They're my great grandmother's needles. I wanted to use them for this one, or else these would probably also be on circulars. So these are going to be socks, or a sock. This is the leg of the sock. This is the instep of the sock. So you kind of knit like this T shape, and then fold it into a cylinder. Pick up stitches along the back for like a strip. Do the heel, picking up these stitches, and then do the sole of the sock and the toe. So they're very interesting. It's all done on straight needles, and I'm very excited to see how they come together. They're looking very ska at the moment. Like, that's with the checkerboard. What came after ska? Scene Kids? God, I feel old right now. But that kind of like early 2000s vibe with the pheasant eye pattern and the bright neon rainbow. So yeah, maybe I'll try and get one of these done during sock week. That might be an interesting challenge, fun challenge. You cast on here and then work this way. And I had to adjust the sizing because the first time I did it turned out like gigantic. So I had to severely adjust the sizing. But luckily I took notes. So I have all of my notes. So I will be able to recreate what I did. So I just put together my interchangeable circular needles. And I'm just knitting onto them. I'm not going to transfer the stitches. I'm just going to deal with the slightly awkward angle for one more row. And I am decreasing every other row on one side, so the shawl is getting narrower. It's going to narrow to the other point, and then I'll pick up around for the next set of stripes. But I've got, this is section 9, so I've got 4 more sections after this one in this top triangle, but like the last section is so tiny. So I was showing off this pattern. It's, like I said, it's an Advent pattern. If for those of you who aren't kind of in the yarny world, it's becoming more and more common for indie dyers, which are people who hand dye yarn in very interesting, cool colorways. It's a huge business, really. But they'll often do what are called yarn advents. So you'll order one, and honestly, people start ordering them in like March. But you get 24 mini skeins, so about 20 grams of yarn. A normal yarn skein is about 100 grams, so you get about a fifth of a skein. You get 24 of those, and 24 different colors, and sometimes they'll come with one full-size skein as like an accent or like the Christmas Day surprise. And the idea is you open it every day in December. So they're very cool. They are also very, very expensive. Kind of the cheapest hand-dyed yarn advent you're looking at least $150, and they go right up to $300 or $400. So they're a little bit out of my price range, but a lot of people do them as like a splurge thing, gift for themselves. So there has become a need for patterns that use 24 mini skeins of yarn, and that's exactly what this pattern was designed to do. So the idea is you would open, it's 24 colors, 24 sections. The idea is you would open, day 1, and then you would knit the section for day 1, and then day 2 you would open your day 2 color and knit the section for day 2, and then by the end of the month you have a beautiful shawl or a sweater or an afghan, whatever your project is. So that's kind of the idea. And this one especially is designed so that each section should be a doable amount of knitting in a day. Since I am only on section 9, you can see how well I kept up with that in the month of December. Yeah, it's like a stitch along, but for Christmas. Some of them are very cool too. There's one, there's a ton of fandom dye works. So they'll have like, Disney themed lines of yarn or video game themed lines of yarn, that kind of thing. I saw one Pokemon advent that each color was a different Pokemon. It was very cool. And they had printed Pokemon cards with like a knitting themed description or move on each one to go with the yarns. It was adorable. Yeah, that was really cool. So, and someone made a blanket out of it and did it like striped by type. So like all the electric types were together and all the grass types were together and all the fairy types were together. It looked really good. So yeah, but I did not have an advent. I just had a bunch of scraps. So I kind of made my own advent. And usually yarn advents are sock yarn, which I don't use a lot of. I tend to use a lot of worsted or Aran weight yarns, which are thicker. So yeah, but still, the idea of one is so cute. It's fun. The pattern was released December 1st of 2022, and it was in collaboration with Yarn Dyer. So it was specifically for that yarn advent that I showed you. So all of the pattern pictures were originally in black and white so that there wouldn't be any spoilers as to what was coming up for the yarns themselves. And then at the end of the month, she sent out an updated pattern that had everything in color. But it's a really pretty palette because usually yarn advents can be a little bit wild because they don't tend to be terribly cohesive. At least I don't think they were originally meant to be cohesive or all used in the same project. So still working on my garter stitch. Don't know if I'll get through this segment tonight, but we're getting there. That's the other reason that I usually work on stuff that's of a heavier weight. I feel like I make progress more quickly. I also have to decide what I'm going to do with all of these rainbow scraps after I'm finished this because I still have more scraps. I've got at least 2 or 3 cakes worth of scraps. I was thinking I've made a tunic out of the hobby twister. No, Cotton King Sultan Shadow. Sorry. And it was really cute and it was crocheted and it went really, really fast. So I'm thinking something like that. I wanted to see how this yarn worked up knitted because usually you really only see it crocheted. So that's why I decided to do something with knitting just to see how it behaves, how it drapes, that kind of thing. But it looks really pretty in crochet. It really does. Yes, Star, I do throw. So there are two, I'm going to say there are 2 main ways of knitting, styles of knitting, but there are more than that. It gets really specific in how you hold the yarn and everything like that. So the way that I knit is called English or throwing. And that's because I keep the yarn kind of loose. When I create my stitches, I pick up the yarn, I wrap it around the needle, I drop the yarn, and finish the stitch. I don't actually drop the yarn. I keep it kind of in my palm so I know where it is. But that's what throwing is you actually lift your finger off the needle to wrap it around. The other main style is called continental or picking. And if you've crocheted, you're probably more familiar with this. So what you do is you tension the yarn in your left hand. If you're right-handed, you tension the yarn in your left hand, and then you kind of, I don't know how well you can see this, but in order to make the stitch, I go into the stitch, I scoop the running strand, and I do it like this. So that's picking or continental. It creates the same stitch. They both create a knit stitch. It just depends on the way that you do it. And then I guess you would. I say I'm not very good at it. Yes, thank you too. I'm not very good at picking. I can do it, like you saw me do it just now. But some people, they do a combination where they'll throw their pearls and pick their knits, or the other way around. There's combination knitting. Norwegian purling is a thing that I've heard of. I don't know how to do it, but apparently it's very handy. So it just comes down to kind of what your hands do naturally. I feel like most people learn throwing and then move on to continental, unless the person who taught them how to knit taught them continental and then they learned English later. But it's really, I think it just depends on who you learned it from. In the like kind of Icelandic, there we go, countries like Norway and Sweden and things like that, picking is much more common. I don't even know why they're called English and Continental, because as far as I know, that has nothing to do with where they originated or anything like that. It's just how they're referred to now. There is a variation of throwing called flicking, where you keep the yarn tensioned in your right hand and you work very close to the needle tips, like scooch your yarn all the way up to the needle tips, and instead of dropping, picking, wrapping around in that big motion, you just use your fingertip and you kind of flick it over the top. I've never been able to get my hand the hang of that. I just drop stitches that way. So it's really what's more comfortable for you. One way is not faster than another way. A lot of continental knitters will try and tell you that continental is faster than English. But some of the fastest knitters in the world are throwers. So yes, you had taught me that the two main techniques for cross stitch are called English and Danish. I'm sure there's some like very colonial explanation for that. Some white people will roar. The fastest knitter in Canada, if you're interested, at least she was the fastest knitter in Canada officially about, oh god, I'm so old, like 15 years ago. So maybe not the fastest anymore. But she was. She owned a yarn shop in the city just over from us, and was very helpful in teaching me in how to knit, especially more complicated stuff. But she's actually a pit knitter, which is a knitting technique that you have to use straights for. You can't use circulars, but it's a very old technique where one of the straight needles is braced under your armpit, and then it would be sticking straight up like this and it wouldn't move, and you just move this needle up and down and then flick with that hand, and that was how she knit, and she was the fastest in Canada. It's a very old style. Some people also do belt knitting. If you look at really old pictures of knitters, especially like from the Shetland Isles and stuff, they'll have these really long double-pointed needles, and they'll be kind of braced against this thick leather belt on their waist. And it's the same concept. You brace one of the needles so that needle doesn't move, and just the other needle is doing all the work. So it's a very, very old style of knitting, especially knitting in the round, or because circular needles are relatively new invention. I'd say like the 40s or 50s is when you start seeing circular needles. And they didn't really take hold until probably the 70s or 80s. So before that, like, everything was done on straight needles. So if you're knitting something like a sweater, you would knit it in pieces on these really huge needles. Or you would use really, really long circular needles. Really, really long double-pointed needles, I mean. So double-pointed needles, they're what they say on the tin. They're a needle. They have a point at both ends, so they're double-pointed. These are used for knitting in the round. So you would have 3 of these, or 4 of them. 3 of them creating a triangle, and then a 4th knitting off of that triangle, and the needles just shift around as you work. So imagine these, but like 20 inches long, and making a sweater. So that's like really old Shetland, Aran Islands, really old stuff, but very cool. Yeah, Toot says if you ever want to see pure chaos crafting, look up lace tatting. Lace tatting is nuts. Lace tatting is like, it looks like their hands are just shaking. Like, it looks like their hands are just shaking like that, but then like lace is coming out at the same time. It's crazy. Yes, the 4 needles are often used for sock knitting. It's really, again, it's a matter of preference. There are several ways to knit small diameters in the round. You can use DPNs. You can use a long circular needle like this, just with a technique to make it smaller. You can use very small circular needles. And it's just personal preference. I have a bunch of DPNs. I don't really use them a lot because I don't like them. I find that it's a little bit like knitting with an angry hedgehog, because they stab you in the hand a lot. But every now and then they are handy. They're good for making I-cords. That's about it, in my opinion. I'm a magic looper for socks. I usually do my socks 2 at a time. So I'm making 2 socks on the same needle at the same time. I will show you what I mean at some point. But every now and then I will get like the craving to make a sock on DPNs. I don't know, it's just like my hands are like, no, we're going to use DPNs today. And it's like, oh, okay, hands. So this is my out and about project. Basically, whenever I'm going anywhere where there's a potential of me sitting in a waiting room for several hours, I'll take this with me. And it's a pair of socks. They are going to be knee-high socks. This is the Hobby Halloween sock yarn in the colorway Creepy Socks. And then this is just Patton's Croy in coal for the cuffs and also for the heels and toes. But as you can see, these are 2 separate socks. They are connected to... Get this out of the way. They're each connected to their own ball of yarn. So what I do is, on this very long circular needle, I knit across. I knit from here across, drop that yarn, pick up the yarn for the next sock, knit across, flip it over, keep knitting with that ball of yarn, drop that yarn, pick up the ball from the first sock, and finish knitting. So both socks are knit in the round at the exact same time. So all of my shaping. So if I have to do any increases or decreases, anything like that, and I do have to do decreases because it is uh, a knee high, so I have to account for the calf. Um, so those happen at exactly the same time on each sock. Yeah. So that's knitting 2 socks at a time. It's a little bit fiddly to get set up, honestly. And you can do this with either toe up or cuff down socks. I did these cuff down, as you can see. I prefer making cuff down socks, and also I find them easier to set up for 2 at a time. Just because you're dealing with more stitches, so it's less fiddly. But some people find the exact opposite, and they would rather start off toe up and set them up that way. So getting them set up can be a little bit difficult, but once they're set up, it's just as easy as knitting a single sock. You just have to make sure that you are keeping them separate, and every now and then I'll just kind of slide them apart and make sure they're not accidentally connected at any point, because the only way to fix that is to rip back, unfortunately. Yeah. So I will eventually finish these. They will eventually become a focus project, but right now they just kind of live next to my keys, and I can easily grab them in case I need to go out and do something that involves waiting, because they're just vanilla socks. There's no patterning on them. It's just straight knitting, and I don't really have to think about them much. But yeah, they're cute. So this is my preferred method of making socks, is the 2 at a time on 1 large circular. You can do 2 at a time on 2 circulars as well, which is another method of knitting in the round, is 2 circulars. I don't have any projects that are currently doing that I can show you, because it's not a method that I use anymore, basically. I much prefer magic loop on 1. I do have sock needles that would work for 2 at a time, or for 2 circulars, because when I started knitting socks, that's how I did them, but I quickly moved on once I figured out magic loop. Yes, the Hobby Halloween sock line is so good. I bought 3 balls of it, and I've used 1, but I've used like half of 2, so I have 2 half balls left, and then this creepy socks. But they're very generous sock skeins. Like, I can probably get a full pair of socks out of what I have left of each of the half skeins. I don't know if that made sense. But I probably have enough of it left. I already made a pair of socks, and I probably have enough for another 2 pairs of socks out of 2 skeins of yarn. That's 3 pairs of socks, 2 skeins of yarn. Put it that way. And then I usually use the Patton's Croy for my contrasting cuffs and toes and heels. Just because I like the look of the contrast, and Patton's Croy is such a great solid sock yarn. It doesn't come in very many colors, but it comes in black, and that's really all I need. It's also what I'm using for those vintage socks. The dark gray is Patton's Croy as well. And the stuff is indestructible. I'm pretty sure after World War IV, there will be cockroaches and Patton's Croy socks. Yes, and Fentex. Fentex slippers, Patton Croy socks, and the cockroaches. That's all that's going to be left. Fentex is a yarn brand that is known for they call it craft and slipper yarn. It's called like oil fin coated. I don't know how to describe it other than it's a sensory nightmare. It's so plasticky. Like, they didn't even try and make it feel soft. It's like steel wool, but if the steel was plastic. It's not good. It's not good. it makes really hard wearing slippers, but it's a nightmare to work with. I don't know, and like especially out east, the grannies crank out so many pairs of Fentex slippers for the craft fairs and things like that. I don't know how they can stand to do it. I made one pair of slippers out of it, and I was like, no, I'm done. So you can see this last section was the triple eyelet, which was a very simple little lace pattern, but quite lovely. Didn't take me any time at all, too. I flew through it. I did go through and lay out the rest of my yarn for this project because I had just kind of thrown all of my yarn into a bag. Like, I knew I had enough colors, but I had planned out which color was going to go where, but I planned it all out, and then I just kind of put them all back in the bag, so now I need to plan it out again because I don't remember what was where. This is my bag of scraps. So each ball now has a little tag on it. This is just a removable stitch marker and a little piece of paper. So this is color number 24. So I will know when I get to section 24 to use this one. So the rest of the triangle, so I'm on section 9. So this is going to be section 10, 11, 12, and 13. So we're just going to finish off the rainbow like that. So this will be a pattern one. This will be garter stitch, another pattern, and then the very tip will be in garter stitch. And I think that this will be enough, this little tiny ball, because it's a very small section. Like you can see on the other end, it will take no time at all to do that. So I'm thinking this will be enough yarn for that. I'm very excited to get to the end of the rainbow because I started with the red end and I much prefer the cooler end of the rainbow. So I'm looking forward to working with the pretty colors. So this yarn that I'm using, it's 100% cotton. All of them are. It's 3 different yarn brands, but it's all 100% cotton. And it is so soft. Like this is not the dishcloth cotton. Like this is not Bernat Handicrafted. This is some nice soft cotton. This is going to be so drapey and just like a little bit of warmth when you need it, but not a ton. It's going to be so nice. And cotton is so easy to care for as well, which is great. I have very little wool in my stash. I usually knit with acrylic, honestly. Most of my projects are 100% acrylic or the closest I get to pure wool is my sock yarn, which is usually a 75% wool, 25% nylon, or a 75-25 or an 80-20, somewhere around there. And then my favorite yarn of all time, which completely contradicts the fact that I just said I work with almost exclusively acrylic, is Briggs & Little. Briggs & Little is a company from New Brunswick. They use local sheep. They mill their wool locally. They dye it in-house. It's very rustic, which is a nice way of saying itchy. It's very woolly wool. Like if you're thinking of wool, this is the woolly wool's wool. There's little bits of plant matter stuck in it sometimes, that kind of thing. But it's my absolute favorite yarn to use. I don't know why, but it's just the feel of it makes my brain go burr. So I use that for mittens, and I'm making a sweater out of it as well. But That's the only 100% wool that I use, pretty much. That's it for the video. If you like the content, please like the video. Subscribe for more cozy gaming and crafting highlights. If you want to see more, join the community on twitch.tv/thecozydh or check out our Discord. Thanks for watching, and keep twinkling below, Starshine.